This is a demonstration on how to use a safety line, also called a lifeline, to save your knitting in case you have a problem later and need to pull it back. At the end of a row, when you know things are working well, you have the right number of stitches and know where you are, you're going to thread up a smaller yarn than the working yarn, quite a bit smaller, or even a piece of embroidery floss works well. I don't suggest dental floss because it can cut your yarn. And I'm going to slide this needle with the smaller yarn in and through all of the stitches on my knitting needle. I'm not taking them off, I'm just adding it. So if you're on a straight needle, you would just go through one or two of the stitches and pull it through, and then repeat one or two and pull it through. I happen to be on a circular needle, so for a quicker way of doing that, I can slide my stitches onto the cord so there's a lot more room, and then still being careful, I should be able to just slide this through all of them, or at least many at a time. I don't want to pierce the yarn, I just want to run my smaller yarn or thread in exactly where my knitting needle or cord is. Now to continue knitting your next row, you're just going to knit, but know that that safety line might kind of be fussier in your way, like here it's just annoying me. Sometimes it ends up on top of your needle like that, but this is why I chose a really different color. So I know that that silver yarn is way smaller, totally different color, not what I want. I can push it off if it gets tangled up and continue along. This row is going to be a little slow and annoying, but not that bad. And the beauty of this is that later on, if you have a problem, we're going to pretend that I knit a few more rows and something went wrong and I couldn't fix it. I could unravel this back to my safety line really easily. So let's pretend big issues. I'm going to take my knitting needles out, which is normally terrifying, but I know I have this backup plan, and I'm going to unravel. And when I feel any resistance, which is probably at the end of a row here, I'm going to stop. I don't want to yank on it. I actually am going to yank on it just to show you what that looks like as a mistake. So here I've accidentally yanked on it, and we'll fix it together. Now I'm going to put this back on my needle, and I'm going to follow my silver yarn because I know I can trust that. Exactly where it goes in the same direction, that's where I'm going to put my knitting needle. And if you're a tight knitter, you might want to grab a smaller needle for this, but if you aren't, it should be fine with your main needle size. So each of these, I can see that my silver yarn is going right through this loop in this direction. That's what I'm going to do. Here it gets a little hard to tell, and that's because I yanked on things and my safety line is not passing through a loop, it's kind of sunken in and coming back out. If that's happened, what you want to do is grab onto your safety line yarn before and after it sinks into the fabric and kind of wiggle it and bounce it and pull up, so now I have a distinct loop that I'll go through. You have to do that for every single stitch. I had two that had kind of gotten pulled in by my yanking. Here we go, and then I'm back in business, ready to continue knitting. The nice thing about this is that you know exactly where you are, you've got the right number of stitches, you might have made a note about what row you were on, or put the safety line in periodically at the end of a certain number of rows, and you know that all your stitches are oriented correctly on your needle. They aren't twisted or backwards, which would cause another issue. You do have to think to put the safety line in ahead of time, so you do want to plan ahead for this because it's a really nice backup plan to have ready for you if you happen to need it. And if you don't need it, it wasn't a whole lot of time invested to thread the extra yarn in.